What a year for Soulslikes. There were a couple bad eggs in the nest, but that don't make the chicken bad. That was actually a pretty good analogy. Like me. 2024 has drawn to a close, and we now have a whole new year of gaming ahead of us. I will soon be making a video on the most anticipated upcoming Soulslikes of 2025, so make sure you're subscribed. But first, let's take some time to reflect on last year and the death-laden gifts that it offered us. So I'm going to go through 5 of the best Souls-like games from last year, why I loved them, and why you should love me. Sorry, wrong video. Anyway, if you haven't played these games, I would highly recommend that you do, and make sure to stick around to the end of the video for the 2 games that let me down pretty hardcore. To start things off, I need to make an honorable mention and explain why Shadow of the Erdtree isn't on this list. As much as I love Elden Ring and its expansion, it is just that, an expansion. Although it has enough content and just sheer mass to compete with any conventional game, it's technically not a full game. So for that reason and that reason alone, it won't be listed among the best Souls-likes for 2024. Although I am kind of listing it now. And it is the best Souls-like release from last year. Coming in at number 5, we have a game that many of you probably have never heard of. Void Souls takes simplicity and focusing on core gameplay and cranks it up to 11. There's not a lot to this game. You play as a triangle, fighting other various shapes, and there's almost no story at all, which is why it isn't higher on the list. What this game does, it does very well, and it is really fun and unique, but I can't in good conscience give it a higher rank due to the fact that there is pretty much an entire aspect of the game that is almost non-existent. However, if you are a gameplay-centric type of player and you enjoy murderous geometry, this one is amazingly fun. And it's an indie game from a small studio, so you get to pat yourself on the back for supporting the small guy. Another Crab's Treasure is a charming, bright take on the typical gloomy, serious, dark gothic atmosphere of Souls-like games. If the average Souls-like is Lord Sauron, then this game is SpongeBob SquarePants. Now for some of you, that is a disgusting thought, like hot cocoa without the marshmallows. But for my more open-minded Souls enjoyers, it's kind of a breath of fresh air. Now aside from its comedic 3-year-old crayon drawing art style, the gameplay is surprisingly good as well. It doesn't have a lot of depth as far as the stats and character building, but it does have smooth combat with enough variety and abilities to keep things feeling fresh. The story is interesting enough, and it is an overall solid experience. But the main thing that sets it apart is the art and atmosphere. So I have it coming in at number 4. This next one is not too innovative on the art and atmosphere front, but it is genius on the combat front. Deathbound uses what they call a party system approach to combat. To summarize it, basically you can have up to 4 members of your party, which all exist in one vessel. Sort of like that crackhead walking down the street in a knockdown drag-out fight with the laws of nature. Except you're dressed a lot cooler. Anyway, basically how it works is as you switch between each character, your appearance as well as your moveset and abilities will change. Now that is cool enough, but the best part is the morph mechanic. So as you fight enemies, your morph meter fills up. Once you have enough, you can perform a morph attack, seamlessly switching between characters while performing a unique attack. Even better still, if you do this when the meter is full, you will perform an ultimate attack for some extra juicy damage. Now, they also did some cool things with the healing mechanics and some other stuff. I did a full review of this game if you're interested in knowing more, but I can't stress enough how smooth and fun the combat in this game is once you learn how to capitalize on morphing and using the best character combinations. The story is also pretty compelling and well done in its own right. If it wasn't for how good the games above it are, I would easily be placing this game a lot higher. But number 3 is the best that I can do. I'm probably going to catch a lot of flack for this one, and probably from two different directions. On one side, people will be wondering how I could possibly even think for 1 second that this game is not number 1. On the other side, people will curse my mother for ever even looking in my father's direction, obviously leading to my birth. And yes, that's all that happened. My mom is still a virgin. All of this because I have the audacity to include this game in a video about Soulslikes. To the second set of people, I have a whole video on what a Soulslike is, where I lay out my definition for what should be included in the genre, so you can check that out if you'd like. But before I explain how it is that I didn't rank this game number 1, let me first talk about the game. Black Myth Wukong is an amazing game in every sense of the word. The visuals are breathtaking, the gameplay is smooth, the story is stellar, and I believe it should have gotten Game of the Year. So now that I've confused you even further, allow me to explain myself. The reason Wukong is not in the number 1 spot boils down to the simple fact that it just isn't Soulslike enough. I do believe that you can barely call this game a Soulslike, but barely. Really, the main thing that is Souls-like about this game is the combat. But outside of that, it's just a really good action RPG. So in spite of its greatness, I can't justify giving it number 1 on a Souls-like list. So number 2 will have to do. Number 1 is a game that I was excited for ever since hearing about it. It is oftentimes described as a cross between Hollow Knight and Sekiro, which is obviously a mixture straight from the nipples of the gods, but it's actually so much more than that. Nine Souls has elements from both of those games, but the way they incorporate them into the game and the world that they've built makes this game feel like a thing all its own. It is a side scroller, so there are some limitations there, but that is where the limitations end. The game has amazing deep combat, a really interesting world and art style, and a story that might be the best of the year in the genre. At worst, I would say it is tied with Wukong. The only negative thing I can think of about this game is that I want a 3D sequel. But everything else is just perfect. The best Souls-like of 2024 is a big title, but this game is worth every syllable and then some. Now, if you made it this far in the video, you might be enjoying yourself. So consider leaving a like and subscribe if you haven't already. But that's enough of the ooey gooey stuff. Let's get to some good old negativity. Here are 2 Soulslikes that left me feeling like I just ordered the burger only instead of getting the meal. Like, always get the meal. How many times do I have to do this before I realize? Rise of the Ronin had me so hyped before launch that I legitimately thought it had a shot at being one of the best Souls-likes of the entire year. It just looked really good, and I've been a Team Ninja fan since the Nioh series. And honestly, the game was not bad. It just didn't live up to the hype. The combat is fun, and it is easily the best part of the game, but the story is uninteresting and forgettable, the side quests are redundant, and the game is just kind of milquetoast outside of the combat. Like I said, it's not bad necessarily, but I think it was so hyped leading up to launch that it just isn't a good enough game to live up to all of that. Sad, but true. That brings me to the biggest disappointment of 2024. Anotria: The Last Song. This game has so much potential, and it truly pains me to be talking about it in this way. But there are just some glaring design mistakes that I can't overlook. The parry timing is super tight and gives you nowhere near the reward you want for attempting to master it. But the biggest problem is the way that they did the elemental system. Basically, they made the different elements function like a game of rock, paper, scissors. So each element has another element that it is strong against and one that it is weak against. which on paper sounds interesting. But in real life, it takes away one of the best things about Souls-like games, which is finding a weapon and a build that works for you and that you like, and then playing with that build or weapon that you enjoy. Instead, you are forced to jump back and forth between multiple weapons and builds based on what you are fighting, which again, sounds kind of cool, but it ends up being annoying. The way you get players to experiment with different builds and weapons is not by force. It's by making a really fun, interesting game that brings players back for multiple playthroughs, and experimentation will happen organically. All of that, alongside the rest of the game just being kind of mid, made this game as disappointing to me as fruitcake. How does fruitcake always trick you into trying it again? Like I've been here before. When will I learn?